Native ducks, welcome and thank you for coming along. Unfortunately, since dawn this morning, ducks have been killed and maimed on the wetlands by duck shooters. Even as we speak, they could be shooting. The only good thing about that is that they are a very tiny minority. We know that the vast majority of people do care. I know that firsthand because I'm also a duck coordinator for Fauna Rescue. So far this year I've raised and released 123 little orphan ducklings and they were brought to me by the public. I have a lot of contact with the public as duck coordinator, and of course other carers have received ducklings from the public as well. They go to extraordinary lengths sometimes. They stop the traffic to catch ducklings whose mother has been run over. They crawl into ditches and trenches when ducklings have fallen in. They find lost ducklings under hedges. They go to a lot of trouble. And they're very relieved when they find someone who can guarantee the safety of their little ducklings. The last thing we want is for them to grow up and fly away and be shot by someone. So I know from first-hand experience that the public does care about ducks. I also know from the fact that we have run public opinion polls, we've commissioned public opinion polls from companies, and we know that 83% of people in Adelaide want the cruelty of duck shooting stopped. It might be surprising that even in the country areas, the majority of people are not in favour of duck shooting because they know about shotguns and they know what injuries shotguns cause. Now, the final sort of way in which I know that the public is on our side is that residents' organisations are supporting our cause. We have the Western Adelaide Coastal Residents Association that supports a ban. We have the North East Hills Conservation Association that is supporting a ban on duck shooting. So all round, a lot of the community supports a ban. We know, of course, that 3 states have already banned duck shooting. South Australia is way behind. For some reason, the government doesn't listen to us, the caring community. They pander to a handful of shooters, and we have to change that. The new Minister, Ian Hunter, was invited to come and speak to us, but he declined. The Shadow Minister for Environment, Michelle Lensink, was invited but declined. But fortunately, we do have Tammy Franks from the Greens here, and we need to remember that next year when the election comes around as to who cares about animal welfare. So please welcome Tammy.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm standing on Kaurna country today and in a state that is one of only 2 states in Australia that allows duck shooting, not hunting, shooting, to continue. I'd like to thank Protect Our Native Ducks and congratulate them on the new T-shirts for organising this today, and also acknowledge that it's been a long and hard-fought battle to try and end duck shooting in this state. Thanks to you coming out on a hot day. Obviously there's a significance that this is the first day of the declared season, and also I think it cannot go unnoticed that this is also a day that the duck hunters have gone on the front foot with PR and launched a cookbook. And what I would say from the outset is that cookbook could be used without inflicting animal cruelty. That cookbook is not actually real PR because that cookbook is not showing you on those glossy pages and in those recipes the cruelty, in fact, that they inflict. So my initial challenge is to the duck hunters: if you're serious about PR, let the media in and watch what you do. Let independent people come in and watch what you do and film it and see whether or not your PR actually stands the test of public scrutiny. I don't buy the cookbook, and I hope South Australians won't be buying the cookbook. We're here today because, of course, the many tens of thousands of ducks and quail who will be shotgunned and die more or less immediately in this season. We're here to mourn those deaths with this Requiem, but we're also here to observe the many, many more who will in fact die slow, lingering and painful deaths. And those many more who will not die but will be wounded chronically and will have the chronic pain that exists. I know we've got other speakers who are much more expert on me on this topic, so I'll stick to the politics of it and the background of the law, how we've tried to change the laws and protect our native ducks in this state. Some would argue, and I would probably argue, in fact, that duck hunting does in fact contravene our current laws. It's under the standards of the Animal Welfare Act 1985. It is an offence to ill-treat an animal. Under section 13(3)(g) and h, ill-treatment of an animal includes the killing of an animal in any manner that causes the animal unnecessary pain, or killing a conscious animal by a method that does not cause death to occur as rapidly as possible. The wounding of ducks shot in recreational shooting can lead to long, slow and painful deaths. Those ducks who are not killed immediately and retrieved by shooters, I believe this conflicts with section 13(3)(g) and h of the current Act. So I would say it's actually technically already illegal. Of course, that would have to be tested in the courts. I would say that we've got laws of this land, however, that show that South Australians don't support cruelty to animal. There's also the words of the RSPCA previously, and who've been a long-standing opponent of duck shooting and duck hunting in this state, and certainly the RSPCA are no radical fringe group. They speak for a majority of South Australians. The Greens have long championed an end to duck shooting, and 4 years before I started Parliament, my colleague Mark Parnell in fact moved a bill to ban duck shooting. It goes down, and he tells the story often because he was the only vote in the chamber for that bill. When he called divide, he thought that possibly there was one other voice in the chamber, but no, he was the sole voice in that chamber of 22 that opposed duck hunting. Unfortunately, if we were to take it to a vote now, I think there might be two voices, definitely, which would be myself and Mark Parnell, possibly Dignity for Disability and Kelly Vincent. I would put a bet on that she'd be there with us, which actually happens quite a lot in the chamber, the three of us against the rest of them. But we haven't got the numbers, and we really need to work to get those numbers. Now, I acknowledge the work of people like the Democrats and Mike Elliott in particular, who have done a lot of groundwork here, who have shown that South Australians oppose duck hunting. He was actually part of the movement with the animal welfare activist groups who collected over 52,000 signatures on a petition to ban duck hunting. Now, at the time, it was the second most signed petition in our state's history, and I've got to say our state is a little behind the time, not only in duck shooting but also in petitions. Those petitions then and still have to be collected by hand. They're not electronic ones. You can't sign up on the internet. So it's a long and arduous process, and I would say the second most signed petition at that time in our state's parliamentary history. 52,000 plus. 2 years after that, that bill that Mark was the sole voice for, I of course took on the animal welfare portfolio when I came in for the Greens, and I thought, well, 2 or 3 against the rest of the chamber isn't really going to get us the number for this bill. So I moved for an inquiry because I thought, let's get information on the table. Let's have a debate that's actually informed by the statistics, and let's have an inquiry that gauges the support and the reality of this pastime. And that inquiry, even in itself, was not only vigorously opposed by the shooters, who were scared of the facts being put on the table, but of course, as many of you know, it went down quite markedly in the Parliament. But when we look at those people who are behind this, they are such a small minority. Approximately 0.1% of the South Australian population actually have licences for this practice. It's a tiny number of people. We've got 1.6 plus million in this state, and we're looking at 1,100 South Australians who have these licences, who are holding us all to ransom and, I believe, contravening the Animal Welfare Act. So the big question is, why are we so heaps backward when it comes to this? Why is it that, along with Victoria, we're the last of the mainland states to actually have this abhorrent practice? Why is it that everyone else is ahead of us? Why has it never been legal in the ACT? I would say it's because they've got good sense. Why is it that in 1990, Carmen Lawrence actually had the courage to lead the charge and ban duck hunting there, saying our community has reached a stage of enlightenment where it can no longer accept the institutionalised killings of native birds for recreation. 1990. In 1995, I believe it was Bob Carr that did the same, but it could have been John Fay, but I suspect it was Bob Carr. Then in 2005, even Queensland under Premier Beattie, banned duck shooting. And he said at the time, it's time to ban the recreational shooting of duck and quail. This is not an appropriate activity in contemporary life in the smart state. Now, 2/3 plus and growing of South Australians oppose duck shooting. Yet 2 people, possibly 3, in our upper house are willing to voice that opinion in our parliament. Something is significantly wrong here. And what I would say is wrong here is the imbalance of the lobby. The lobby is very powerful for the duck hunters. They get in the ears of each and every local politician. Aside from the fact that they do have guns, of course, they are organised, they are vocal, and they threaten to take votes. And yet, we know there's only actually 1,100 licences. So I dispute how many votes they could actually take and how much money they could actually muster. If we were more organised, and I do acknowledge that we have been in the past, but if we really put pressure on, this is a vote changer for people. This is something that should be an election issue come 2014. Paul Kiker is no longer the minister. I know that there's been a lot of targeting of him in the past, but Ian Hunter, as the new minister, while he's not here today, he does actually have a record of being quite a good animal welfare advocate. And what happens every year within the ALP in particular, and this is who I'm going to point you to in the first instance, is in October or so, around about the end of the year, every branch and every rank and file member and every MP feeds into the ALP state conference that changes their policies. And almost every year, I believe, a motion goes up about banning duck hunting. So this year when that motion goes up, let's have talked to any rank and file Labor members that you know. Let's have talked to every single local MP. Let's have got local branches to have moved motions opposing duck hunting and saying it's time to get rid of it. Depending what happens on the election, of course, we've then got either Labor or Liberal. The pressure must be put on the Liberal Party as well, and do that through your local MPs. That's the most direct route, because in fact in the Liberals it's the parliamentary party that largely decides what their policies will be. So I say we've got just over 12 months, and we've got this season to provide as much evidence as we possibly can and to put as much pressure as you possibly can. And anyone you know in the ALP or the Liberal Party, have a word to them directly and just ask them if they think that this is an appropriate thing for their political party to support in the year 2013. And if it isn't, then you won't be supporting their political party in the year 2014.
Thanks very much, Tammy. That's really good advice. And certainly the fact that you're here today in this horrible weather shows that you care. So please don't stop caring today. Please carry it on, because we do need to take this political action. And I will say a little bit more about that at the end. But we have here also Sheree Sellick, President of the RSPCA, the peak animal welfare body in Australia. And of course the RSPCA has a very long history of opposing duck shooting because of the cruelty. So please welcome Sheree.
Thanks, Suzanne. The RSPCA does believe that shooting our native water birds for sport is cruel and has no place in a civilised society. It's cruel, and this is the absolute nub of the matter, because of the method of killing. The method of killing, that is, using shotguns, guarantees that significant numbers of animals will not be killed outright, as we've heard before. We're talking anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 will not be killed instantly, but will be injured. Many of them flying off, wounded, often with steel shot embedded in their bodies, or their beaks or legs shot off. Then they'll come down somewhere else, away from the hunter, and suffer very nasty, slow and agonising deaths. This is what will be happening to thousands of our native ducks from today until the end of the season in June, 4.5 months from now. The RSPCA does believe that this activity is in breach of the Animal Welfare Act, specifically section 13(3)(a), (g) and (h), and we have legal advice to support our position. In any other context, it would be a prosecutable offence. The trouble is, shooting our native water birds for sport is legal. specifically allowed for under the National Parks and Wildlife Act. So we have two acts of parliament in opposition to each other, essentially. Now, shooting groups will use all sorts of arguments to justify being allowed to do this sort of killing, including that it is a way of getting free-range organic food. Well, we have laws regulating the killing of animals for food. Geoff Russell posed an analogy for me that I think illustrates it beautifully. Just imagine an abattoir using a method that allowed a quarter to half of its animals to escape wounded and die a slow and painful death. We would shut them down in a nanosecond and prosecute them. So let's be really crystal clear what this issue is about and what it's not about. It is not about food, and it's not about pest control. These animals are not pests. The RSPCA is not opposed to government-accredited pest control programs carried out by authorised professional sharpshooters. No, this is first and foremost a cruelty issue. And that is why the RSPCA is so opposed to it, and why shooting groups try so very hard to divert our attention from the core issue. It's not just the RSPCA, but all animal welfare groups worldwide, as well as our animal welfare legislation that abhors painful and inefficient killing methods. And the overwhelming majority of the public think so too. As you've heard, recent independent research showed us that 83% of South Australians want this banned, once they understand how many birds get killed. So we appeal to Minister Hunter and the Weatherall government to listen to the chorus of disapproval from the great majority of the voting public. Please follow the lead of the courageous members of Parliament in Western Australia, New South Wales and Queensland, and consign this dreadful sport to the dustbin of history.
Thanks very much, Sheree. That is absolutely the key point to consider when they go on with this garbage about their organic, free-range, sustainable meat. No slaughterhouse would be allowed to operate the way they do. So it is a totally inappropriate analogy. It's false. And they think that the public will perhaps not be so critical if they think it's just another way of eating meat, but it's not. So don't for 1 second swallow that argument. Now, some people have a wrong idea about shooting in that they think of what they see on television and they think of rifles and single bullets, and they think that if someone is a good shot, they can kill instantly. And that is true. The thing is, duck shooters do not use rifles, they use shotguns, and Geoffrey's going to explain what the characteristics of a shotgun are and why that means that inevitably, no matter how good a shot someone is, there will be wounded ducks. So could you please welcome Geoff Russell, the President of Protect Our Native Ducks.
Thank you very much. Over on the side here we have a picture that's got a caption on it, 40,000 wounded ducks. There's actually only about 1,350 little tiny ducks on that picture. If we had 30, and if each one was an actual duck, that's about the level of wounding that we will be seeing this year in South Australia with this duck season. Alan Holmes, the CEO of the Department of Environment, I explained to him the way shotguns work back in about 1992, 1993. He's a smart guy, Alan Holmes. He's got a pure maths degree, among other things. And he instantly understood exactly what was going on. And all you have to do to understand how shotguns work and why wounding is so inevitable is to look at this picture. This picture is actually correctly to scale. It's about half size. So if a duck shooter with a shotgun shoots a duck that's 30 metres away, that circle, the big circle there, is about 1 metre wide. Oh, it's about 30 inches, a bit less than 1 metre. And this is the sort of thing that you would see of the shotgun pellets, except the pellets here are a bit oversized. The actual size of a pellet, if you look at the diameter of the little ball bearing shaped object, is about like a roofing nail. So getting hit with a shotgun pellet is about like getting hit by a nail gun, getting a roofing nail through you. So a lot of shotgun people will talk about shotguns bringing animals down, bringing ducks down by the blast, the impact. That's absolute rubbish. Doesn't happen. What happens with a shotgun is that 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe up to 5 or 6 pellets will hit the duck's body. They will rupture organs, they will smash wings, they will go right through the duck. They even come out the other side. If a duck gets hit by 6 pellets, probably only 2, maybe 3 will hit something hard enough to stay in the duck. You'll often hear people talking about how can duck shooters eat ducks with all of that lead pellets in them? It's because there's not very many lead pellets in them. And they don't use lead anymore anyway, they still use steel. It doesn't matter. There's not a lot of pellets in the duck, and you can see what's happening from this picture. The little circle here, this is correctly scaled. This is roughly the size of a black duck, and the small area is what's called the vital area. That's really where you want to hit the duck if you aim to kill it. You can see that this duck here would have been hit by 2 pellets in the vital area, 1 pellet outside, probably would be brought down. Okay, you can see that if the duck was half an inch one side or half an inch the other side, it would be wounded and it would not be brought down. A couple of pellets outside that vital area will wound a duck, probably seriously, but not kill the duck. Once you've seen a picture like this, and this is an accurate representation of what happens, if you throw a handful of gravel at a wall, that's basically what happens with a shotgun, except they're very small pellets. They spread out in a random pattern. There are holes all over the pattern, and that's why a shooter can shoot very accurately at a duck and not bring it down, because there are holes in the pattern, and that's exactly what happens. Winchester in the US, a gun maker in the US, munitions maker in the US, hung up and shot a couple of thousand ducks in the 70s, just hung them up and shot them to see what happened. These ducks were shot with perfectly controlled shotguns, not shotguns flying at a duck in a swamp doing 50 or 60 kilometres an hour, but at perfectly controlled duck in the dead centre of the pattern, and a lot of those ducks did not die. Now, that's just the way shotguns are. Even people who try to commit suicide with shotguns don't often succeed. They blow off their jaw, they blow off all sorts of things in them. The most deadly way, if you want to shoot yourself with a shotgun, you shoot yourself in the stomach, and you'll probably bleed to death. But shotguns don't kill. They don't kill people, they don't kill ducks. They knock things out of the sky. SWAT teams use them because they bring people down without killing them. They're not a killing weapon. They're a disabling, horrible mess of a weapon. That's what they are, and that's what duck shooters use. So, I urge all of you to follow Tammy's advice. Go and see your politician. The reason that we still have duck shooting in this state is that duck shooters do go and see their politicians, and they frighten them. They walk in the front door and they frighten people. And if you've ever dealt with duck shooters up close and personal, you'll understand this. They can be very intimidating people. What you have to do is go and see your politician, explain the issue, explain exactly what is happening and why you oppose it, and get your politician to do something. And you can't say this enough over and over again. Go and see your politicians. Go and see your politicians. Make appointment after appointment after appointment. Get your friends to see them. Get your relatives to see them. Get anybody you know to see them. Because that's what duck shooters do. Duck shooters are not very articulate often, but they can frighten people. They work very well verbally. They get up people's noses. They get in their face. And that's what happens. People are frightened of them. So you have to counteract that. You have to see your politicians, because that's the only way we will get this banned. Thank you very much for coming out today. It's a shady day, but it's hot out there.
Yes, thank you very much. Not a day of our choosing, obviously, but it's important to mark the first day of duck season, because otherwise it will go unnoticed, and all those ducks that are being killed and maimed, nobody will be paying any attention to them. A lot of this goes on private land. We used to mount rescues at Bull Lagoon, but Bull Lagoon hasn't been open since about 2000, because they know if the public can see the wounded ducks, that'll bring duck shooting to an end straight away. So now most of it is hidden away. So it's important that we mark this event and that we recognise how many ducks are suffering. We want to make this the last duck season, and if there is still a duck season next year at the election, we will certainly be making it an election issue, and we will be targeting vulnerable politicians, and especially those who've got a particularly poor record in animal welfare and are in marginal seats, like Paul Kiker is certainly one that comes to mind, because the government will need every seat it can get and it can't afford to lose any. So we will certainly be targeting politicians if it's going on. But please, let's give Minister Ian Hunter a chance. He is known as a more compassionate person. So contact him, let him know how you feel. Please don't sit back and say, isn't it awful, someone should do something, because there is no someone, it's only us. Please let him know how you feel. There are letters to sign on the table, there's information on the table, there are lots of sausages, vegan sausages sizzling away over there, there's lots of muffins over there, so please go over and have a look at the displays, and thank you once again for coming, and please keep up the action, because that's the only way we can make this the last duck season. Thank you.